And it's time for your favorite show of the week,
Woo!
Ag Attack, here with Jordan Atwater and Cassandra Kennedy. We're talking about all things agriculture and politics. We have recently talked about genetically modified organisms.
We've talked about education in urban areas. We've talked about PETA and their malicious attacks on the FFA program. And last week we talked about the difficulties and the challenges that are facing our young farmers or first-generation farmers today. So today, though, I'm a little excited for this because we're actually going right into the heart of politics. Mm-hmm. So what is kind of our schedule for today? We are going to go through the candidates and talk about their stances on agriculture and their political stances and how that can affect the farming community, the agricultural community, and ultimately everyone, because as we've said multiple times, agriculture does touch everyone. If you eat food,
you eat food, something's affecting you in agriculture.
Most definitely. So this is going to be kind of interesting because me and Cassandra have different political views.
We do.
So we've split this up. So I've taken the Republican candidates and Cassandra has taken the Democratic candidates. So we are going to kind of get into some of our candidates and some of the topics and their stances and how that could affect agriculture, because we know that the political debates are heating up and we're seeing the candidates kind of get a little bit thinned out, and we're starting to see our front runners here and there with all of the different state caucuses and the elections. So we are just going to get started. So I guess
we should also pose some questions first. What are important issues within agriculture to you that you think politics affect? And you can tweet at KDNE, and we can look up some of those stuff. You can tweet at Jordan Atwater, JORDYNATWATER. And, or if you have any comments or questions about what we're talking about, please talk to us, because this is part of join the conversation. We want to have a conversation and both equally get educated by each other through this radio show. So why don't you start us off with...
Yeah. Okay, so I took the Republican side of this debate, and the three frontrunners that I've been noticing in the news and the ones that I focused on were Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. So basically, we're going to kind of cover topics all the way from farmland taxes to farm labor to GMOs to the Farm Bill, Clean Water Act, renewable energy, subsidies, everything. We're going to hit all of it. So one of probably the most, I'm going to start with Donald Trump just because he's right now, he's a hot topic, hot button issue. For a lot of individuals, he has garnered a lot of support, but curiously, he doesn't know that much about agriculture, which, you know, his realm is in real estate and finance, so he knows more about that. But a lot of the information that I got today is going to be from when they came to Iowa for the Iowa caucuses. So a lot of that information, obviously Iowa is an agricultural state. Yeah. So a lot of them did their research and they were prepared for questions, but some of them weren't. So we're going to get started though. We've talked about GMOs. GMOs is kind of one of my top, it's my hot button issue, I would say. So for Donald Trump, it's really interesting. He took a stance that he was supporting crop biotechnology, and he was also one that said he agreed that GMOs are safe. But the interesting fact is that when his votes started to slip in Iowa, either himself or whoever controls his Twitter feed retweeted a humorous tweet from one of his followers that took a swipe at the intelligence of the Iowa voters and a jab at the Midwestern state's #1 commodity export, Monsanto. So he tweeted that basically since people were starting to follow Ben Carson, that they must have too much Monsanto in their corn and it's affecting their brains. So, I mean, it's kind of, I think he meant it was in a joking way, but it was attacking his voters. So clearly it's not really going to be in his favor. So, but it kind of goes, I don't know if you're joking or not, but to me that's almost a reversal on your stance. Like you're saying, like, you're making this joke about Monsanto having too much of that in the corn and how it can affect someone's brain. Even if it's a joke, like if you're a supporter of that and you've told your constituents that that's what you support, you probably shouldn't joke about it. Give much information on what he thought. And also with GMOs, we've heard about how a lot of individuals and lobbyists would like to have bills that are requiring companies to label food. So when you go into Walmart, if you everything like that, he's for biotechnology and food production. But then he made that tweet. So I'd say he's a little wish-washy.
I mean, coming from corporate America, what he could have, and they're advancing his best interest, and which is probably why he supports it.
Yeah.
Where he also knows that other people don't support it, so he doesn't want to be like set on it.
Yeah. So he's kind of wishy-washy on the GMO issue. So, Cassandra, did you have a candidate that talked about the GMO issue at all?
Bernie, actually both candidates kind of touch on the GMO, but Bernie was the most outspoken on it. Bernie Sanders. His whole thing, he has at length explaining on his website what a GMO is actually.
Oh, interesting.
So like in about 2 to 3 paragraphs, in a header that's titled "What is a GMO?" He goes through and explains like where science doesn't have anything to back up, whether it's bad or good, and where most scientists stand behind GMOs, and the other debate of how hurting GMO's reputation is really like this war on science that America has going on. But at the same time, he does believe in labeling. He believes in labeling everything that you're eating because he believes in America's right to know.
Yeah.
And so that's his stance on it. He's not against GMOs, but he's not necessarily for them. He's more for the labeling aspect of it.
Okay.
So
interesting. I think it's interesting though. I really like though, I'm not a Democrat, but I like how he explained what a GMO was on his site, and that that almost is a testament maybe to his purpose for educating people, making his constituents a more educated population on what the issues could be. So I find that really interesting. But I remember you were kind of telling me before we got on the show today, he has a really interesting background with agriculture. Could you explain that a little bit?
So see, that's all.
Oh yeah, he has a ton of stuff on agriculture on his website. So that's really interesting.
But I mean, that could very much come from the fact that he is a senator for Vermont, and Vermont is a very heavy dairy agricultural state, and so through his time there, he's worked a lot with dairy farms and small mid-sized farms, and really tried to help them rise up in the state. He's pretty anti-American corporations, and I mean, as with anything in his political campaign, he's anti-corporation. And so he talks a lot about that and how he's helped that with the Vermont farming.
Okay.
And so that's kind of his background, and probably why he has so much to talk about with it.
Yeah.
Because he's one of the candidates, because I feel like a lot of political candidates don't have a heavy agricultural background. They come from cities like me, and they aren't educated about it. They don't understand its importance, where he does. He worked in a state where that is one of their main trades. So
interesting. I just kind of got on his website right now to do a little looking myself, and he talks about family farming, which we can get into a little bit later. But yeah, he does say what a GMO is, and he is for the labeling of foods. Personally, in my opinion, I don't really see the point of labeling foods. Like, if it's no different than an organic organism in any way, besides like it's not affecting you on a genetic level, it's not affecting you on, a biological level, that it's harmful, what is the point of putting that label? Like, I guess I can understand where maybe some individuals want to know, but I also think that increases the fear factor. Then you start having this separation, and people are like, the people that don't know what a GMO is, they see that and they get scared, and then they're going to we start seeing those problems. So I kind of understand to a point why they would want to label it, but at the same time, I'm just kind of like, it's really not doing any harm. Like, until we have the scientific evidence that shows yes or no, why are we going to go ahead with the labeling? Because then you're just introducing this.
It's not like a nutritional fact. It's not like it's telling you exactly what's going in your body.
So, I mean, I guess it's, transparency too. Maybe that's consumers can have a transparent, that transparency. They know what's in whatever they're buying. So that is an interesting take on the labeling thing. I personally am not for the labeling. I think that's going to...
and each time he's actually brought it to the Vermont state constitution. It would be an amendment to one of their farming... Sorry, I'm not incredibly literate on this subject, but it was an amendment to one of their farming bills, and it was about the labeling, and it got struck down twice. And then when he tried to take it nationally, too, it got struck down. So he's lost 3 of those fights on him.
So very interesting.
And he blames Monsanto for it, actually.
Does he really?
Yeah, when he talks about it, he blames Monsanto because once Monsanto found out what they were trying to do, Monsanto came in and threatened to sue.
Oh.
Because apparently there's a patent against one of their products that would have to go with GMO now.
Yeah.
And I don't know the logistics to it, but because they threatened to sue, he says the big arms won out. And
yeah. Well, I mean, that is where you get into, like, corporate agriculture. You can find a problem just because they do have the money to throw around in a way. And patenting is now a big thing. And everything that we do, everyone wants to own the rights to what they've created. So we do run into those issues where then you do have the right to come forth with a lawsuit. So, all right. So we've hit Donald Trump and we've hit Bernie Sanders with the GMO issue. And I'll just kind of say for Ted Cruz, he also supports the use of biotechnology in food products and opposes efforts to require mandatory labeling. So for the GMO versus non-GMO. And Marco Rubio is of the same stance. So they both just said yes on the issue. They didn't really divulge into it. The only one that really divulged, and it was more of a divergent introspect on what they did, was Donald Trump. And that's just because he either tweeted that or his staff. I don't know. He denied the claims.
I still don't think he knows what a GMO.
Well, the really funny thing is actually with that tweet, and sorry, we're getting now away from Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, he deleted it right away, but there was a screenshot of it that got around, and then he said it was one of his staffers. He blamed it on one of his staffers.
Naturally.
So, who knows? But, I mean, it's on your account, so if you're going to put your name behind it and someone's doing that for you, I'm assuming that it's your stance. So,
blame.
I think he was trying to do a little bit of, some
scapegoating.
Yeah, scapegoat and kind of figuring out some way to come out on top in that situation. But yeah, so Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz support biotechnology and food production.
See, and Hillary is kind of the same way. She's like that happy medium because she really supports the technology aspect of it, and she has actually been supported by Monsanto before, apparently.
Oh, really?
And she's visited them, and
interesting.
And sorry, my computer is on the wall, so if I go away from my mic, that's why. Apparently she was supported by Monsanto, their close associates. But, however, in her recent campaign, she's kind of changed her technique. So she doesn't outwardly say she's for GMOs. She's kind of like Bernie. She doesn't agree with labeling, or she wants labeling on all of the GMO aspect of it. But at the same time, she supports the technology. She wants to continue looking into the technology of it.
Which I think it's an aspect almost of like an economical mindset as well when you think about biotechnology, because we have to feed a certain amount of people in this world. And I know we've said this multiple times on the show, but you can't not improve how we're producing food, how we're going around and figuring out genetics of food. Like, we have to genetically modify foods to compensate for droughts. Like, we have, genetically modified corn in a way that it's drought resistant.
Yeah.
And, you have soybeans that are resistant to dicamba. So you can kill the different weeds and stuff that can choke out those soybeans and decrease yield. So we have to have these improvements in order to feed the world. So if we don't do that, then we're not really helping our economy by being able to export all these items of agriculture. Because, agriculture is a large part of our economy in the United States. It doesn't necessarily get that much recognition for it, but it is. And so that's where I think most of these candidates, when they say yes on this, they understand that you have to make those advancements and you have to understand, where science and technology can take us in order to only improve.
Yes.
So we can't be scared and go all the way back to organic farming. Not saying organic farming is not the way to go, but in order to have mass production of these things, we have to figure out a better system sometimes.
We have 7 billion people to feed right now.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I do think there should be research pushed into how it is affecting us medically.
Yeah.
Like, instead of just pushing it under the rug and figuring it out 50 years later like we did with asbestos, maybe we should consider, maybe doing some medical research now. Like, that's one thing that kind of frustrates me with the United States is we're so anti-marijuana, but we don't even allow scientists in this country to research it.
Like, I would agree. No, I would agree with that. I think it's that fear factor. Yeah. Like, I have no problem with people researching into GMOs. Like, I think more research is the best research. Even if it tells us negative results in a way, at least we know what not to do in the future. So I would agree with that. It would be nice to see the politicians take more of a stance on supporting research towards agriculture and agricultural technology, but it's not a top, issue. Like, it's not like immigration laws or college funding and secondary economy, all the things that are really kind of ultimately affect everyone. I mean, agriculture affects everyone, but it's like, it touches everyone, but it's not like directly in people's lives, like how it would be for my family as farmers and consumers and producers. So I wish some of the politicians would take maybe a little time to do a little research into it. I would like to see more politicians kind of be informed on it, but that's why we're talking today. So it's all good. So we'll move on from the topic of GMOs. I know I could talk all day on GMOs. So that's probably one of my biggest things I love to talk about.
You can re-listen to Jordan's GMO talk if you go to doneline.com and click on the KDNE page and then click on the Ag Attack logo. All of our shows, our past shows, can be found there. So if you're ever just out for a run and want to listen to Ag Attack, we're there for you.
Yeah. So, if you want to go back and listen about Chipotle and GMOs and labeling and all that, go back and you can, search for that and listen to us talk some more. So, the next issue that we're going to get into that I believe the Democratic side also touched on is renewable energy.
Yes. You want me?
Do you want to start with that one? Yeah.
I can start with that one. So first candidate who really came out and talked about renewable energy was Hillary Clinton. That's her big farming agricultural base. She really wants to push the renewable energy. She said that within the first term of her presidency, she wants to increase solar panels. She wants to have more than 500 million solar panels installed in this country by the end of her first term.
Wow. So
that was one of her long-term goals if she becomes president. And then there's a lot of other stuff that she talks about within that, like the blending of ethanol and gasoline. And she really, again, pushes for that science. She thinks that we should be spending money on researching new biofuels and how to produce cleaner energy, specifically for farming. And then she also you found this actually, how she wants to push small farms. She would give them double funds, or you can say this more eloquently.
No, you're okay. I'm going to bring it up right now. So she took a stance that she would like we talked about last week how supporting young farmers and first generation farmers and how the government can provide, a low interest rate loans, and you can get government funding and loans for buying land and things like that. Mm-hmm. And she made this statement, which I found really interesting, that she would support the next generation of farmers by doubling funding for the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program. So, doubling that funding only helps, and it only opens up more opportunities for farmers. Mm-hmm. So that kind of goes into she actually has quite a large reach into the farming community. She actually is taking stances and making suggestions on how to change things for the ag community. Whereas
and where Bernie fighters will be like, but she's backed by corporations. But she's actively looking into Monsanto and trying to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
And she's going for that more educational approach, which is what we were talking about last week.
And for the larger companies, it's kind of a double-ended sword.
Yeah.
With the larger companies, there are problems, yes, but at the same time, they do fund a lot of the research for these things. They are the ones that are progressively improving biotechnology and food production. They're improving technology and the ag industry in general. They help fund different programs. So there's that other aspect. And a lot of people say that's just to cover their tracks and to, but they're still doing it. You can't fault them for doing that in a way. So while I see that side, I'm not necessarily a supporter of large corporations, and yet I am. It's kind of weird. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of both. So I get where she's coming from by still supporting them, but at the same time, you're a little apprehensive.
Yeah.
Obviously, you never know. Yeah. It could go either way.
But what do some of the Republican candidates
So what we've got here for renewable energy Ted Cruz was actually one of the individuals. He does not. There's something called the Renewable Fuel Standard, and it kind of ties in with the EPA, which is a proposal for reduction of renewable fuel usage for liquid fuel supply. So this kind of goes into a little bit of the ethanol mixture and different things with our gas supply. And no, Senator Cruz supports renewable fuels, but he believes there is a proven demand for ethanol, but it needs to stand on its own. It's not a footstool for the government. So he wants the government removed from the ethanol companies. And the federal government, he believes, should not be involved and pick a winner or a loser in this, because if we up the amount of funding for ethanol, it does kind of create this balance with, your oil industry as well, because it's taking away a little bit of power from the oil industry. So he says he just leave it up to the people, let the market decide, which, I mean, that's a Republican stance.
Yep,
less government involved in your businesses. That is a stance, which I get where he's saying, though, is, if that's what individuals want for a renewable energy source, that's true. And we are producing a lot of corn right now. Corn prices are low, so opportunity to sell that corn and sell it into an option to look into renewable energy. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, we can always grow corn. Why not look into that? So he does support renewable energy, but he's almost a no, because he's kind of like, the government doesn't need to decide this. So he wouldn't really do a whole lot besides maybe remove himself from that conversation. So Marco Rubio says kind of the same thing. He thinks that we need to move towards a market-based energy policies where all the sources are self-sustainable, so the government's not involved. But he did say that since we have made mandates that go into these fuel laws and renewable energy acts, we can't just pull the rug out from under them. So he is kind of thinking more of a transition. So where Rubio is just kind of like, we're going to wash our hands of the issue, or no, Ted Cruz is more, we're going to wash our hands of the issue. Mark Rubio is talking about making more of a transition, but moving it more towards a self-sustained industry instead of having government influence. So I find that really interesting. Donald Trump doesn't, besides saying, oh yeah, we need renewable energy, he doesn't really have a lot to say.
He denies that, according to the New York Times side-by-side comparison, Donald Trump doesn't believe that climate change is a thing, so that's cool.
So, I mean, clearly he doesn't see it as a problem.
Yeah, so he doesn't see it as a problem.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of, that's the Republican stances. It's more just removing government.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is a problem. For me personally, removing, the government from those industries, because those are large dollar industries and they do control, lobbying aspects, and they can control like influences and stuff like that. So while I do believe that like them providing subsidies in a way can help out, like you don't want to have gas prices skyrocket, and we'll get into a situation where the economy is hurt by it.
Or monopoly is not called.
And monopoly, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a touchy thing, but most of the Republican candidates would like to remove themselves from that debate. So.
Again, and the Democratic candidates are more research heavy. They want to invest in research. Bernie Sanders is really big on climate control and climate change. He has a lot that he has to say on renewable energy and sources, and his big thing where Hillary really talked about the solar panels, his whole thing is wind energy. So he would like to create, I don't want to say subsidies, but he would like to create programs in the United States that give more back to farms that use wind energy and try to go off on that. I know in Colorado we had a huge push for that a couple of years ago, and we actually have a lot of wind farms on the eastern half of the state now. Yeah. But that's pretty much where Bernie, he has a huge paragraph about it. And that's the biggest thing I took away from it. So,
but I do notice on his page, though, he talks about new income for farmers, which that's going back to the ethanol discussion. Yeah. And, using corn for ethanol. So kind of an interesting perspective on building a little bit a new section of the industry in a way. Not that it's not already happening, but kind of focusing on that. So that's a little interesting. But yeah, I think I'm enjoying this debate right now, but I believe we will be taking a quick break and listening to some great advertisements by the Edge of Indy here.
They are PSAs.
PSA, sorry.
Yeah. Public service announcements, but close enough. And again, if you have anything you would like to add to this conversation, you can always tweet at KDNE. You can watch us on the TV if you're in Crete, Nebraska on channel 97.13. And you can stream us at doane.edu/KDNE. We look forward to hearing more from you, and we'll be back with this debate. And we're back with KDNE. Ag Attack is here on the channel right now. We have great music, but at a later time, because right now we're talking about politics and agriculture.
Yes, we are.
We've been having a nice little debate about how the Republicans versus the Democrats stand on agricultural issues.
Yes.
We just talked about GMOs and
renewable energy.
Energy.
Kind of a little bit the GMO thing. That was really interesting, seeing the Democratic side and the Republican side almost matching statements besides the labeling concept. But seeing the differences in the renewable energy, that was pretty interesting. That was pretty interesting. But we're going to move on from that, and we're going to talk a little bit about farm labor.
Okay.
So this necessarily is not a huge issue in Nebraska, I would say, but more on, California faces this issue, sometimes Texas and Florida, more your states that have more ties with the fruit production industry. And so one of those things, it's a little bit more of a correlation here, is a lot of the farm labor that we experience in our country comes from our immigrants that come in to the United States, finding jobs within the agricultural system and help with food production. And so we're going to talk just a little bit on what the stances are for our candidates on the immigration laws, because we do have laws in place that allow immigrants to have work visas if they're working on farms and fruit production lines and things like this. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I'm going to start off with is everyone kind of knows Donald Trump's stance on it, but we're just going to say it again. So the Donald Trump is not necessarily a supporter of immigration in this country, I would like to say. And he has made a vow to deport 11 million immigrants in the country that is kind of the statistic of that are in our country illegally. So this poses a threat almost to the U.S. farmers, if in a way that if you own a large business or you have a large farm, you need bodies there to help you pick, produce, do whatever with your farm and your with your plants and production here. And so without having that labor force, you're not able to get that product to the market. So a lot of California farmers are really concerned with this, and specifically they're looking for lawmakers that will overhaul the existing, it's called the H-2A guest worker visa program. So that was that program that I was talking about that's allowing immigrants to be able to come in and work and have like a work visa, and then they can work towards being legalized, being a legalized American. So they want to see more kind of a reform, because it's really hard to get that visa. I mean, clearly we know it's hard to kind of, the process to become a United States citizen is a difficult one in general, but it's pretty costly and it's extremely inefficient. So a lot of farmers are looking for it in the aspects of farm labor. They want to see this change. Mm-hmm. Trump has really ignored this issue. He's deliberately said that he will not touch this issue. He would rather prevent the immigration policies from acting and make it a more stringent process.
Make America great again.
Make America great again. So a lot of specifically California farmers are the ones that are upset about this. There's a statistic that roughly 1.4 million undocumented immigrants work on U.S. farms each year, or about 60% of agricultural labor force. Mm-hmm. So that's a significant amount of people that are providing for one of our top economically producing faculties. So that's an interesting aspect, but I found it really interesting that regardless if you are Republican or Democratic, because there were two individuals on here that talked about they wanted to see this guest worker visa program overhauled because they needed to see some change because it was hard for them to find workers in a labor force to help them with their production. So that's Donald Trump's view. So which is kind of you know that's where he stands on that issue. But for, I guess, do you want to go with one of yours?
I can.
Okay.
So Bernie Sanders kind of has a quite opposite approach. Bernie and Hillary are both, if you look at their immigration issue, they are both on the side for a path to citizenship. Hillary Clinton calls for a complete overhaul of the system. She wants to completely reform it and make it a lot easier for immigrants to get their visa and then actually immigrate to the United States. I know a lot of issues. I worked at Keto, I'm a Mexican girl for 4 years, and we actually, I probably shouldn't say this on air, but we had illegal immigrants who were working for us.
Yeah.
And what they would say is that it wasn't that they didn't want to become citizens. It wasn't that they didn't want to pay taxes or that they were trying to use the system.
Yeah.
Is that they weren't ever educated on how to. They weren't ever told what it would take.
Which is an issue,
And then I knew a student in high school, actually, whose family, found out, oh, we're writing the system. We don't want to do that. We want to be good citizens of this great country for us.
Yeah.
And so they went, and they were like, how can we file our taxes? And when they did that, people found out they were illegal and sent them across the border. And so, there's, a lot of different issues to this, and those are obviously kind of extreme examples, but, it's still, a lot of it is education. A lot of it is making it easier for them, not having to pass a citizenship test when half of the United States can't even pass that, natural-born citizens.
Which is a good point. No, I think that the process itself needs a large overhaul. I do understand, having regulations.
I don't think we should just let everybody in, but when I had family friends who immigrated from Ireland, and it took the Ireland people who speak our language, who are kind of accustomed to a Western culture, come to the United States, and it took them 20 years to get their citizenship.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I guess for another Republican stance on it, Ted Cruz is against. So he's not. Donald Trump is on his lone little island of deporting undocumented immigrants, but Ted Cruz is against legalizing undocumented immigrants. So not even really allowing them to, when they come to the United States, then pursue that opportunity while they're in the United States. So they're
not really given a path to citizenship.
Yeah. But now Marco Rubio is more on a path to stay. So he's more on, if you come over, then let's get you to the point where you can stay in the country legally. So improving those work visa programs and things like that is more where his stance is going. It's a little bit different than the citizenship aspect. I don't think they're quite on the stance where the path to stay really includes that. You can still pursue that, but I don't think they're thinking about necessarily focusing on the overhaul of the citizenship program. Okay. So,
is Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz the one who comes from an immigrated family?
It would be Marco Rubio.
Is it Marco Rubio?
Yes.
Okay. So that would explain.
At first
I thought it was Ted Cruz, and I was going to be like, oh, that's kind of ironic.
I believe so. Let me check on that. I'm pretty sure it's Marco Rubio.
And while you're checking on that, I can talk about Bernie's stance. Bernie is similar to Hillary. He wants a path to citizenship, and he wants to find that kind of happy medium, but he actually talks about it specifically in the realms of farming. And so he has a whole section on his agricultural page that talks about agricultural labor and how like Jordan was saying, a lot of agricultural labor does come from the Latin American immigration that is happening right now, and he's also very concerned with slavery. He is really interested to see how that has affected farming, and if there's still slavery going on in the world. Not saying that farmers are slave owners still, but that there's always the danger of that happening, just like there's the danger of sex slavery and sex trafficking. There's labor trafficking. And so he really looks into those kind of issues with the labor immigration as well, and that's why he wants to see a greater path to citizenship, because then if they are a citizen, obviously they can file for those complaints, they can file for actual rights, and so that's one thing that he really has an issue with. So
so looked up It's actually Marco Rubio's parents
Okay.
went through the immigration process. So he obviously has connections to it. So he sympathizes with that aspect. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why he's on that path to stay. Mm-hmm. And I think he would be one to also look at the aspects of, with the work visa, making sure that there's policies in place to protect them in that same sense, because that also is a part of immigration reform as well. It's not just like, oh, well, let's make the process easier for you. Let's make sure that the policies in place also help you while you're here.
Fair and equal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of the Republicans. So, what is Hillary's stance on it?
Like I said earlier, she just really pushes for a complete overhaul of the system.
Complete overhaul. Okay. I was like sitting there. I was like, I'm pretty sure she was like complete overhaul, but I couldn't remember. So.
And Bernie's not complete overhaul. But he does see it needs to be performed and easier for a path to citizenship.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. No. So yeah, farm labor is, it's not necessarily that topic itself is like the hot topic, in our country, but immigration is one. And that is a direct correlation, those two together. So it's an interesting aspect of our politics and our political debate.
Yeah. And like I was telling Jordan earlier, I mean, our country really is built on immigration. We pride ourselves on being this melting pot of cultures. And what a lot of people, when they first get to this country, their first step into the workforce is being a farmhand or working in some aspect of agriculture, be it food service or be it through that. And so it is a big stepping stone for them to go on and do these greater things and get their foot in the door in this country. And my ancestors were like that. I'm very Irish. They came into coal mine. That's part of agriculture. And my grandpa coal mined for his entire life. So like, and now my dad has a different job, and now I'm third generation, and I'm going up. And so like that is a big step, is looking at what we can do to make that easier for them.
No, it's definitely, everyone can be kind of affected by this policy in some way. I mean, we all,
or your generations were affected by it.
Exactly.
From it.
Exactly. So it's definitely a issue not only for the agricultural community but for others as well. But again, just to reiterate why it's so important to have these discussions about the political stances of our future leaders of this nation is to really dive into the discussion on where we want our country to go. And these individuals will hold a lot of power. And obviously, like, going back a few years is to the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, President Obama played a large role in that bill that was going to allow that pipeline, which is technically, because that pipeline wasn't even American. That is a Canadian oil company there. So that's in it, it was about to pass, and there was a lot of pushback from agricultural lobbyists, but that's where we have to come in. And when we're making these decisions on who to vote for, yes, all the other issues are important, but we also have to talk about the agricultural issues, and we have to figure out what their stances are. And to me, sometimes it's scary to see when some of the candidates don't have really any knowledge or opinion on agricultural issues. And that's where it bothers me. And there was a comment made on an article when we were researching all these things. There's not a lot of information out there.
There isn't,
on their agricultural
I will
stances.
Be like the first to say that the Democratic side was a little harder to research for because they have less than the Republican side does. Yeah,
and the Republicans, I think a lot of constituents probably in the Republican Party, I would say to a point, they're maybe have an ag background in some way. And so it's interesting. I did get a lot of information, but a lot of it was from Iowa. I mean, a lot of my information today was from Iowa, and that was just because, with the Iowa caucuses, they talked about those things. They had farmers there. They were asking those questions. But my fear is like, what, that's one state out of a bunch of what people tell me all the time is the breadbasket. I'm like, I'm so tired of that name. I get it. It's okay, but we're much more than that. But then these leaders don't prepare. Like they prepare just for that situation. Yeah. But when it comes time to it, they don't really. I haven't seen that many candidates in this race really take an invested interest besides Hillary Clinton, which I think it's just kind of been over time because President Obama actually had a lot to say on agriculture, back, I believe, when he was running his first campaign.
Interesting.
And so I remember him talking about things, and he did talk about large businesses, and he talked about things like Monsanto and larger corporations, and he did talk about agriculture. And I just haven't seen it that much. And so this one article, going back to this article that I read, it talked about how even our news industry, to a point, doesn't ask the questions about agriculture.
It's true.
Which, like, we find out a lot and really often is just those topics aren't covered. People don't think it's an issue. They don't think it really relates to them. And I feel like a broken record when I keep saying this every single week. It's all about educating.
Well, and like I'm sitting
country.
here and I'm a journalism major, and I've been doing this show weekly now for about a month, and I've written even a column about it, and I can see that there's endless things to talk about, and yet we went to the New York Times, and they don't even have an agricultural section, a part of their newscast anymore.
No.
And I thought that was really interesting, and so that is a part of the media and a fault of ours, and we need to be preparing the nation for understanding things that are more important than Kesha. Sorry.
Well, it was really interesting. One time we were talking about
Not saying that the Kesha issue isn't important right now, because it is. But
it is. But it's also one of those things that, well, you hear about the stories where, like, you know, God bless his soul, but Lamar Odom, when he kind of had his overdose issues, like, that made national news. And, like, for a long period of time. And I'm not saying that those issues shouldn't be addressed, but it's like, do we not have more going on in our country that we can't talk about? Like, is this really what, you know, that's what's, like, it really saddens me to a point, because it's like, I would be fine if it was talking about any other issue that was really, like, you know, the immigration issue, Syrian refugee issue, agricultural issues. But, you know, what's funny is I had a friend who we had this discussion probably last year, and they said, well, it's because it's not like the sexy news. It's not like what everyone wants to hear about, that, like, you know, that gossip rag, like, interesting news. And it's like, well, it actually really is. Like, when I hear about, like, Chipotle and, like, them having, you know, their rotavirus and E. coli outbreak, like, yeah, it got national news then because there was over, like, 500 people affected by it. But should we really have to wait until that happens to have these conversations?
And we don't. But, I mean, from a news perspective, I do get where they're coming from. Because, I mean, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
We are a business. We have to make money. Like, I mean, reporters right now, even in their 15th year of reporting, only still make, like, $36,000 a year.
Wow.
And so and with the way that it's going, we're just going to keep making less and less. And one way to do that is get people's attention. We need that ad money. Yeah. And that ad money goes to stories that are the sexier sells. And unfortunately, like, you may find Chipotle really interesting, but what we're finding is other people find other things a lot more sexy, and it's unfortunately usually what's not important. Because they don't want they don't want it to be in the front of their mind. They want something relaxing to read or something they don't have to think about.
They can be removed from it. It's not directly affecting their life. Exactly. And I guess my question, to kind of relate it back to politics, though, do you think that's why, like, politicians don't really talk about these issues? Because they know it's not really going to, like, if they made a comment about agriculture, it's not, besides people that are directly affected by it, it's not really going to have an impact.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting case, because it's not like they're really trying to win money right now. They're trying to win votes. And I feel like issues are more important to them. But I do see, like in Bernie's case, his whole thing is to find that social overturn. Yeah. And so for him, that's more important. Unfortunately, in agriculture, like, for him, agriculture fits in a lot to what his social reform is. Yeah. It's just, it's not something he ties it to. So maybe that is a fault of his. He could tie it back to more and actually, like, show people, like, look, I have all this stuff on agriculture on my website. Like,
and I think, well, and that kind of goes back to the other candidates, like, when they have to have these debates on things, like, that topic never comes up. So he has to be more prepared. Everyone has to be, like, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders, they all have to be prepared on these issues that they know they're going to debate over immigration policy, whatever. The ones are always the hot topics. And so, those other ones, it's like, well, I'll show people I have them here, but we don't really need to talk about it.
And, like, at the same time, too, like, they're like me. They don't see how it affects them as much.
Exactly.
And because they don't see how it affects them, they don't see how it affects other people. Yeah. Which, like, honestly, we were going to bring up minimum wage a little bit. And I'll bring that up here because a lot of the liberal candidates, they believe in raising the minimum wage nationally. And because where they're at, like Vermont, New York, Washington, D.C. has a really high cost of living. So naturally, they're going to be like, yeah, we need to raise it nationally. And that's just kind of ignorant of the fact, like, if you raise the minimum wage in the state of Nebraska to $15 an hour, that would be catastrophic.
Well,
like, for our economy.
Well, and like I was telling you earlier, I've heard and talked to business owners that have talked about their rehiring process, like when, you know, even in our small community, we have turnover with people graduating and things. So they're concerned about even hiring new people because they can't afford all these crazy increases. And they're like, I know they're like with these minimum wage increases, they're like, oh, we can give money back to small businesses somewhere.
It's not how it happens.
It's not easy. Well, it's not.
And that's what kind of with the farming thing, you know, they're not affected by it, so it's not on their top of their mind. It's not something that they want to talk about.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, ties in with a lot of reasons why it doesn't come up. And it's also probably why it doesn't come up in the media, is because media people, they don't, it's not something that affects them.
And so, I mean, and that goes back to one of our conversations that we had the second week. It's just about educating our urban and even the rural areas all over again about the importance of agriculture, because clearly, like, we, you know, had with South Korea, we hadn't done any exporting of beef. They didn't buy any U.S. beef for like a 7-year period, which to me, that's a large chunk of money that could be coming back to our economy.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, that's a concern. But again, like, I'm directly tied to it. I'm informed on that. Yeah. Whereas other people don't really get that information or that education on it and why that's so important and what could really happen with that. Yeah. So it's kind of sad, but at the same time, it's not really going to change. I wish it would. I mean, to whoever's listening out there, go tell your friends, like, get educated on ag issues and, like, ask your leaders.
Care about real world things.
Yeah, don't care about e-news as much. Get rid of the e-news. But we're going to take a quick break here, and then we are going to finish up with Ag Attack. But if you guys have any questions or any suggestions or any stances, please tweet at us at KDNE, or you can tweet at me at Jordan Atwater, JORDYN ATWATER, and we will bring those up here in the next 10 minutes. And if not, we're going to finish out our discussion. So,
all right, we'll be right back. And we're back here with Ag Attack on KDNE 91.9. We've been talking about politics and agriculture, as we always do each week, but this time we're getting at the heart of politics. We're looking at
definitely
each candidate and seeing how they have reacted to agricultural policies. We've talked about immigration, GMOs, clean energy and renewable energy. What else is there to talk about?
Well, we can go into, you know, a lot of people, there's like the Clean Water Acts, which it's for the two sides, a little bit of background. So it's all about, for Republicans, removing government from the decisions and allowing the states to decide, and for Democrats having more regulations and just research on it. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So with clean water, which is actually kind of a big topic for Nebraska just because of the Ogallala Aquifer, and, you know, Nebraska is lucky. We sit right on top of it. Unfortunately, the surrounding states don't sit on as much of it, but we have to work with them on how much we're taking from the rivers, how much we're taking, you know, we have to monitor all of that. So a lot of people, this is where we get into like the Clean Water Act, is should there be like regulation from the EPA and at the highest level to come in and say, this state gets this much, this state gets this much, everyone gets this much. And so on the Republican side, Marco Rubio actually was one of the individuals that made a statement on this, and he believes that it needs to go back to the states. It needs to be state decided, and it needs to be kind of figured out between the states. And I remember when I was in elementary school, there was a pretty large debate with Kansas, actually, on the water issues. And because it was when we made an agreement with how much water would be split between the two states, they said an actual number. Well, that year was a drought. Ooh. So there's a point, it should have been a percentage, but it was just like the logistics of things. So it just got into that tricky area. So for Republicans, they more are saying like remove, you know, federal government from the issue and leave it up to the states to decide. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I know it's not something, maybe a subject that you know a lot about, but
I know I actually did some reports for DCTV last week, and last year they actually rezoned Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska for water.
Oh, okay.
From, I think, the Platte River. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah.
But for the first time in like 10 years, and I didn't know if it was national or if it was state.
I feel like it would be state by state. Just usually like it's a collaboration between the states. I could be wrong on that, but usually these disputes are solved between the states, and it's usually worked out pretty well that way. Because, I mean, in all honesty, who knows best how to use that water besides the people that are actually using it?
Yeah.
And that was a statement that, like, Carly Fiorina, I know she's dropped out now, but she made that statement with the Clean Water Act is like, why should a bureaucrat from the EPA be coming in and saying how much water you can use or what you can use for your farm? Like, they're not necessarily the expert on what the water sources are, you know, how they work, how much you need for your crops and things like that. So the Republican side, I agree with that. You know, there is a point where it's like, let the individuals that are right there, you know, on the battlefield of this issue be able to give those decisions. And so Marco Rubio kind of takes that same stance. He didn't really say that same statement, but I do think that it should be decided between the states, and, you know, the farmers should have a little bit more of a right to say exactly where things are going to be happening. So
yeah, to be honest, I don't know if the Liberals have said anything on it.
Yeah.
I can't find anything. I found something about Hillary, but I don't think it's discussing this type of Clean Water Act.
There's different subsections that go with the Clean Water Act. So there's different things that, I mean, you could take it all the way to like Flint, Michigan, and like those type of issues, but it comes like the EPA like is now saying that like the regulations on what you can use on your crops. So like for herbicides and
that kind of stuff.
You know, insecticides and things like that, and like making sure that you can only use so much, and then because they don't want it in runoff, obviously, but farmers know that. They're not gonna, you know, put like a ton of Roundup and like let it, you know, have a runoff into the streams and stuff. So it incorporates all of that, and then it incorporates like sustainability of that water as well. So that's a little bit of background on that, but not really like, it's again not like a huge topic. So no one really like, they all, and I told Cassandra this during our break, all the candidates are great at just saying yes. Like yes or no. Like yes, I support it. Hear. You know, I want to hear like, how are you going to fix the issue? Like we have a lot of issues in this, you know, later on in this semester, we'll talk about subsidies and things like that. We decided we are not well enough informed on that right now to talk about those, but people don't really, you know, our candidates, I have yet to see any of them really give me like a plan in terms of agriculture, how they want to support it, besides Hillary Clinton on that one issue of like wanting to double the funding.
Yeah.
And then
Bernie's gone into quite a bit of like what he would do.
And Marco Rubio has gone into a few things on like, at least with like the immigration policy and especially for the labor force and improving that visa, and on the aspect of renewable energy. Those aspects, they have a plan for you. But again, those tie back to a little bit more of like your national issues. So it's just kind of makes me so frustrated to see that that's what happens. And
then, I mean, going on the Republican debate, though, like, is that more of a state-by-state thing? Should only the state governors care about it? Should we... Should we look at what Pete Ricketts has to say about...
Which, he would be more informed on the issue. Nebraska is an ag state, so he's going to have, like, discussions on this issue because that's what affects our state. So, for the Republican side of things, like, you go to a state level... This discussion is like hot news. You'll see these kind of discussions that will be in like the Lincoln Journal-Star, the Omaha World Herald to a point. Like,
no, I don't know if you're gonna see them in the Denver Post, to be honest.
Nah, I don't really. I don't quite think so. So, but yeah, for the for the Nebraska side of things, we'll see those conversations, and then at your local level, yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's always like in my hometown paper. It is agriculture is like they have like an agriculture page, like a section. So. Yeah, but when you move past the state level, like that percentage of like like your kind of visibility of agriculture is like fraction, like 1/100th. and it was even that paper said it was like there's only like 2 national kind of organizations that advertise like the political debate and like talk about national ag issues. Like people will pick up on things like I guess there's rumor has it doctors are saying like the Zika virus is been started by a Monsanto insecticide. There's no research to support that at all, but that has now made national news. And so it's just like, really? Something that's not even substantiated by research. So it's just, again, it goes back to like, can we not make these issues and priorities a little bit more well known? And I know it's hard because it doesn't, like, everyone doesn't think it really affects them, but it does. Oh, I just want to hit that home. It does. It affects everyone.
You eat food, so it affects you.
If you don't eat food, first off. Yeah. And second off, like, realize that
even if you're on a juicing diet, that is food.
It's food. Everything.
Being farmed somewhere.
Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah. And it's like, learn where your food comes from. Learn what affects your food. Like, I have to learn what affects, like, the aspects of my college when we have any type of increases, and I'm going to be leaving, but I still care about that. Yeah. So it's like, you should care too.
If something affects you, you should care about it.
Exactly.
Drive it home. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was Ag Attack for this week. Thanks for listening on 91.9 KDNE. Next week, we might dive into some subsidies. We might go into Pete Ricketts. Who knows?
We'll let you know via Twitter, guys. So if you can get on the Twitter or Facebook.
We might have a guest speaker.
Yeah, so we're going to try to bring on some guest speakers, some professors from Doane that have a little more expertise in the areas of, soil conservation, the Platte River Project conservation. Yeah, so we will be talking more about those. So we're going to try to get some guest speakers on here, guys. And if any of you guys want to hear issues, please tweet at us, hit us up on Facebook, or you can contact KDNE at KDNE.
Yes, please join the conversation. But coming up next, we have some music for you. It looks like we're going to start with Lunch Money Lewis by the Bills, or maybe it's the opposite. It might be Bills by Lunch Money Lewis. Either or. And then after that, we just keep going with Sleeping with a Friend by Neon Trees. That's a great one. Stolen Dance by Milky Chance. He stole my heart when I saw him live sing that.
Oh my gosh.
So KDNE, we've got the great music here on the edge of indie.